All right. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm really glad that those of you that are here are here. Um, I want to remind you of the format of the Odyssey, which is to let our speaker speak uninterrupted for 30 to 40 minutes. After about 40 minutes, Scott, if you're not done, I will cut you off. It's not as easy as you might think. Sometimes there's a lot to say. So, anyway, but then after Scott has finished, we will take a minute or 60 seconds of silence. Then we'll collect the offering, and there'll be an opportunity for questions. Always remembering that Scott has the option to answer a question or to decline to answer a question. So, without further ado, Scott England.
All right. Well, hello everybody. So, uh, I guess in some ways, I was a little fortunate in that almost 23 years ago to the day, I gave my first Odyssey,
Oh,
July 16th, 2000.
wow.
And we had the recording in the library, so I was able to pull it and listen to myself and go, "Oh my God, I was a baby." Um, but it gave me a chance to kind of, think about, okay, what did I say then? How much of that is still accurate, and also reflect on what has changed since then.
Yeah.
Um, so, since I think I'm not sure that anybody who's here today was there 23 years ago. Okay.
Good for you.
Um, so I guess I'll kind of start, with just kind of general biography course of my life. Was born December 31st, 1968, in Sacramento, California, on Mather Air Force Base. Was supposed to be born on the 24th, but my sister and I decided, nope, nope, we weren't ready yet. So years later, once I was a nurse, I got a chance to talk to my mom and go, Mom, how the hell did you do that? Back in the late 60s, twins, a week late, and we were both over 6 pounds.
Mm, mm,
I'm like,
mm.
that is practically unheard of nowadays. Just like, I didn't do anything special. Y'all just weren't ready.
Mm.
So, reason we were in California at the time was Dad was in the Air Force, just starting out his career. My mom had been in the Navy Nurse Corps, and back then, once you got pregnant, bye-bye. So she became an Air Force wife, and worked as a nurse, at various times throughout her year. Um, my first memory of religion, really was, the base chapel in Omaha, Nebraska. Going and, because it was, ecumenical. There was, at the front of the church, there was, a big altar and big, um, wall with curtains, and you pull the cord, cross, pull another cord, crucifix. I don't really remember if there was any option for anything else. And honestly, I don't know, if they had any services other than Protestant and Catholic.
Mm.
Um, but we were in Omaha, uh, amazingly, for about 7 years. Even up until then, about every 2 years we transferred. So we moved all around the country, up until we started school. Um, 1981, we moved to Virginia, and that was when I started eighth grade. And at that time, we weren't living, near or on a base. And we ended up joining a Methodist church, which was, the church that my dad grew up in. I don't remember much about the church, other than getting confirmed. And for some reason, looking back, it feels like they were very ahead of their time. Um, I think in ninth grade, we did some sort of program that was probably similar to, UU's About Your Sexuality. I don't remember a lot of details about it other than it was talking about sexuality, talking about different things. And the thing that I most remember was it was really one of the first times I started having somewhat of an idea about my own sexuality. Because one of the activities that they had us do was that they had a room set up with black and white photos of men and women in kind of artistic nude poses. I remember being much more interested in the photos of the men than of the women. And at the end of, I think it was like a weekend retreat or something. And at the end of the retreat, the parents came in and, we'd break off into, small family groups and talk about things. And I remember my mom and dad being like, you can talk to us about anything. And like, yeah, not that, not that. I can't talk to you about that. I'm not going to talk to you about that. Um, so we moved back to the Omaha area after my 10th grade year. So ended up being there for junior and senior years. Went to another Methodist church um, and sang in the choir, did Sunday school, directed our youth choir for a while. Um, and it kind of, just kind of basic standard things until my senior year. And for whatever reason, our Sunday school teacher, I think he was a Southern Baptist um, by heritage who had married a Methodist and so converted to Methodism. He decided that he was going to play devil's advocate. We were, the topic of the class, I think, was just talking about religion or talking about beliefs. And he would just make these blanket statements like, well, if you haven't been baptized by immersion, you haven't been baptized. And it's like, that's not what the Methodist Church says. If you haven't been baptized by immersion, you're not baptized. And it turned into battle of the wills. And I could only take that so long until I was like, that's it, I'm done. I'm out. I was like, I'm going to go downstairs to the nursery and take care of babies with my girlfriend.
Mm, mm.
Um, so got got out of there. Um, I knew by the end of that school year that I was probably gay. Except there was the whole, well, but I've never kissed a boy, so how do I know for sure? I ended up breaking up with my girlfriend, and ironically, we both came out to each other next summer. Go figure. I don't know who turned to the other or if we just were drawn to each other for some reason. But um, yeah, that was a big surprise of I'm gay. Oh, so am I. Okay. Um, college, my first year of college was in San Antonio, Texas at Trinity University on a full ride Army ROTC scholarship. Oh. Yeah, that kind of went along with I'm pretty sure I'm gay, but I don't know for sure because I haven't kissed a boy. They're offering me a full ride. How do I turn that down without getting into why? Which I wasn't ready to do yet. I was going to double major in Russian and biology. So not Russian biology, but um, I sang in the chapel choir because I had auditioned and made the university choir. And as a first year student, the requirement was, you got to do chapel choir as well. However, I don't really remember much of the services because I usually sat there reading a book or doing homework or trying not to fall over because I was hungover. Um, there at Trinity, it was also, I did kiss a boy and I liked it. Um, got involved with the gay campus group, dated several boys, not very successfully, um, and ended up coming out to my family over winter break. Um, my sister and I had been, would talk to each other occasionally, and at one point she was, asking about dating, and I was just being very vague, and for some reason she was like, oh my God, you're not gay, are you? Like, we'll talk about it when I get home.
Mm.
And so got home for winter break and she came into the living room, marched in. It's like, so are you? Am I what? Gay. Oh, yeah. Oh, I think it was like a day or two before I was supposed to go back to college. We're sitting around the table and talking about various things, and I decided to bring up one of the classes I had taken, which was ethical issues, um, or social issues and ethical perspectives, or something like that. So, talk about all sorts of things. The death penalty, euthanasia, abortion, homosexuality. And mom was like, "Huh, let's go back a minute." I'm like, what? Death penalty? She's like, no. Um, so I came out. Although at the time it was, well, this is what I think right now, maybe. Um, and she was, very much, oh, we love you. We're still your son. You're still our son. We always love you. Let's go to counseling. And so, with 24 hours to go before I go back to school, we went and saw a counselor who amazingly was very open and supportive. Being a 18-year-old, you know, you're not gonna change me, blah 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 blah. She's like, so your mom tells me that you say you're gay. I'm like, yeah. So are you having any issues or problems that you want to talk about? No. Okay, well, I guess it's really just, my job to help your mom come to terms with, it's not anything she did and that it's okay. I'm like, you're not gonna try and change me? She's like, why? Do you want to change? No. Well, then why would I do that?
Mm.
Um, so I later found out because mom was usually one that told the story. That then there was a conference multiple years later. Both mom and dad got involved with PFLAG, which is Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays. Mom first, and she dragged dad along. Um, and at some point, mom was organizing a conference for educators on the issues of sexuality. And she was so busy organizing the conference, she didn't have time to be on a parents panel. So she roped dad into doing it. And that was the first time I ever heard his perspective. Basically, he termed it the hit and run coming out.
Mm.
That I told him. And in less than 48 hours later, I was on a plane back to San Antonio, leaving them on their own.
Mhm.
Um, but they had always been supportive of me and my sister. They were band parents, they were chorus parents, they were drama parents. They turned into gay parents.
Mhm.
Basically, taking over P Flag after a couple of years. My dad coordinated a youth group through P Flag that he ran for, I think, almost 20 years.
Mhm.
Um, so, um, so I went back to Trinity. The the perk of having a full ride ROTC scholarship was I will give the Army some level of wisdom that they figure 17 and 18-year-olds, you can't have them commit to essentially a 12-year commitment because the way it worked was for every year they paid for school, you owed 2 years of active duty. Um, However, for a full ride scholarship, the catch was you can leave after the first year with no obligation.
Mm.
So there was the out. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go back and I'm going to say, yeah, thanks. It's been interesting, but no thanks. And actually had a Regent scholarship that would have taken over the full ride. So that was that was my plan. I was going back to San Antonio. I was going to be down there. Mom had other ideas. Got back for the summer and found out that she had written to several colleges in my name saying I was interested in transferring, and had set up some interviews. And I'm like, I'm not going. And Dad's like, please, just, just humor her.
Mm,
Just
mm.
go on one. Go on one. So the trip I took with her was 3 hours east to Grinnell, Iowa. And I fell in love with the campus.
Mm.
I also fell in love with the fact that they had a gay group listed in their little student guide. They had Russian.
Oh.
And at that point, I was acing Russian, had almost flunked out of biology.
Mm.
So double major, not going to happen.
Mm.
So change of plans. I transferred to rural Iowa, which found out shortly after starting the year that basically one of our nicknames for ourselves was the San Francisco of the Midwest. It was a very active gay community. Um, and it really gave me a chance to explore um, who I wanted to be as a gay man. And that meant a lot of, I guess you could say, role playing. The very first meeting of the gay group, I had met another guy on my dorm floor, and we spent, I think, probably over 2 hours primping and getting ready. Walked into the group and was like, I tranced over to the sofa, sat down, like, um, and I think everybody in the room was like, who is that?
Mm.
So I got to play at being very effeminate. I went through a phase of trying to emulate the campus Leatherman. So trying to be very macho. That didn't work. Um, it um, it made things interesting though, because from that first impression and from my really gravitating towards more flamboyance and whatnot, I think I terrified most of the gay men on campus. So I did not date very much while I was at Grinnell.
Oh.
However, I did become somewhat of an institution um, for a good part of the time there. I had several skirts that were part of my wardrobe. And I wore them frequently enough that there was a tour being given to prospectives. And I heard about it from the tour guide later that um, they're walking around showing them things. And one of the parents was like, "Oh, is that man wearing a skirt?" Tour guide looks over. Oh, yeah, that's Scott. He does it all the time. And our next building is the science building.
Yeah.
So
That's great.
yeah, it was a chance to do a lot of exploration. It was also a chance for me to start doing some spiritual exploration. Um, hadn't really done anything with church. When I got to Grinnell, yeah, they had a chapel. I didn't go to services. I was working food service on the weekends. Um, so was still majoring in Russian, but um, Grinnell did an immersion program. So pretty much day one of year one, the professor walked in speaking Russian.
Mm.
About 15 minutes at the end of the class that they would break into English to make sure that everybody understood what the homework was. Otherwise, you were speaking Russian to your limited ability from the very first day. I didn't get that my first year. Trinity did not do immersion. We spent probably 75 to 80% of our time in English because my classmates had no concept of grammar. And Russian is one of those languages. You change word endings based on what part of the sentence it is. You decline verbs. You have all sorts of tenses, blah, 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 blah. It was old hat for me because I'd taken French and then Latin. So I'm like, oh yeah, declining. Yeah, I've got that down, no problem. But get to where you're expected to be speaking from day one, and um, nobody had ever explained the concept of adult language learning. That you're gonna sound like a 3-year-old, you're gonna mess up, and that's okay. that's how adults learn languages. You don't learn it as naturally as a child does. Was very, well, and still am rather type A, and I wanted everything I said to be perfect.
Hmm.
So writing and reading, no problem. I can take my time with a dictionary. Speaking, a little more of a challenge. Um, so by halfway through my junior year, I was gonna do a semester abroad in Moscow. And for whatever reason, I had everything lined up, had the application, had recommendations, had everything all in the packet to drop in the mail to the program. And I had a mini mental breakdown of just, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, what am I thinking? How can I do this? You know, I'm gay, going to the Soviet Union. It's illegal. I don't really know how to speak the language. I'm going to be trying to ask somebody, for directions to someplace, and something's going to happen, and I'm going to get arrested. I'm going to get thrown in jail. Oh my God, I can't do this. Rip, 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 rip. Throw it away.
Hmm.
So I decided I'd finish the Russian major because all I had to do was one more class junior year and senior seminar. Anything else I wanted to do, I would have had to get, 8 or 9 classes exactly in order in the next 3 semesters to graduate on time. I was like, okay, just do the easiest path, finish out the major, and then I can take whatever else I want to take for the next year and a half,
Hmm.
which turned out to be an awful lot of women's studies classes.
Huh.
Um, I, I will fully admit I initially got interested in women's studies because of a boy who was working in food service that I had a huge crush on who had taken women's studies. But once I got into it, it was fascinating. Um, and the talking about social roles and gender roles and expectations and breaking things down. As a gay man, that was you know liberating for me. Um, And so some of the classes I took were religious studies classes focusing on women. So women
Hmm.
in Jewish and Christian traditions. We looked at neo-paganism with Starhawk, and for some reason that really started speaking to me. But found myself in a quandary of, okay, I'm interested in this neo-paganism, goddess worship, but it's all goddess, 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 goddess. Yeah, there's a god, but he comes from the goddess. Returns to the goddess. He's part of the goddess. He's related to the goddess. I'm like, gay man here, not really interested in sexual relations with women. You're all, it's like, how do I fit into this? And so my final paper for that class actually was, I think, titled something like, Man in the Moon or something like that, looking at being a gay man in a woman-centric spiritual tradition.
Hmm.
And so one of the things I took from Starhawk was that she had talked about taking creation stories and changing them, rewriting them
Hmm.
to be meaningful from a female perspective. And I was like, oh, well, if you can do that, I can take your creation stories and rewrite them and figure them out so that they're meaningful for me as a gay man. So that was, a little, you know,
Hmm.
starting to think of, okay, just because something's written down or just because that's the way it is, the way it doesn't mean it's the way it has to be. I can find my own path through things. Um, Graduated in 1990, really didn't have much of an idea of what I was going to do, other than somehow I was going to change the world. I thought at the time that maybe that meant being a social worker,
Hmm.
but I wasn't really sure. I wasn't ready to go to grad school. Um, I got a job advocating for healthcare, or healthcare reform, which turned out to be door-to-door canvassing.
Hmm.
Really slimy, smarmy stuff. Ugh. I didn't even make it through the probationary period.
Hmm.
I was so disgusted with what they were doing that, like 3 or 4 days in, we were canvassing in West Des Moines. I was living in Newton, a town about an hour east of Des Moines. Um, and After about an hour on that night, I was like, I'm done. And we had, group of it. They would take a group of us by van out to an area and drop you off, and blah blah. Blah so many. You're supposed to, contact so many households, blah blah blah. Um, I was done. I walked from West Des Moines to downtown Des Moines, where the offices were. Dropped my clipboard against the office door with a nasty note saying, "Y'all suck. Keep the paycheck. I'm out."
Mm.
Drove home, and my roommate was like, "You're home early." Like, yeah, I quit. She's like, "Oh, you know rent's due in a couple of weeks." Like, I'll find a job. Um, Went looking, happened to walk into a nursing home because they had an ad in the classifieds. So I think I walked in on Friday afternoon and I started Monday night
Mm.
as a care assistant. Had never done healthcare, had done food service in college, had worked for one summer in the kitchen of a nursing home. I was like, it's a job. It's a job. I can do it. Since it was nights, there were times that, I had, some downtime, talk with the nurse. After a couple of months, the nurse I worked with overnight was like, "Oh, have you ever thought about being a nurse?" I'm like, no, no, never thought about it. Yeah, mom's a nurse, but we never talked, really talked about it. It's like, well, I think you'd be good at it. You seem to have a really good rapport with the residents. I'm like, yeah, whatever. A couple of weeks later, director of nursing calls me into the office after a shift. Have you ever thought about nursing?
Uh, uh,
No, but I was like, well, yeah, you seem to be really. It's like, I think you'd be really good at it. It's like, well, I still don't really know what I want to do, but I mean, how hard can nursing school be? No, I can go be a nurse and until I figure out what I want to do. So I ended up moving into Des Moines, checking out nursing programs, and in the early 90s, there was not a lot of flexibility. BSN programs were, it'll take you 4 years.
mm,
Like, I just graduated with a BA. I have all the liberal arts stuff. Like, oh, well, one semester you'll have, you might have 3 credits done, and then the next you might have 18, but it'll take you 4 years. It's like, thank you, but no, I'll find something else. And I found a diploma program, which was a good old fashioned school of nursing based at a hospital. They had just started an accelerated program. And so we're doing their first year nursing courses over the summer. And they said, well, if you take a couple of prereqs and then do the first year nursing courses in the summer, you can start in the fall as a junior and be done in 2 years. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that sounds a lot more reasonable than 4. Um, Ended up being, it was a great program. One of the benefits of it was from day one, I was spending at least 36 hours a week in clinical.
mm.
Um, So we'd have lecture on Monday and Friday, and we'd be doing clinical Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So lots of hands-on time, lots of chance to experience all sorts of different areas. I came in with a huge list of areas that I thought I might be interested in, and slowly worked
Mhm,
through them.
mhm.
Um, Transport nursing was one that I thought might be interesting until I sat in a helicopter and went, yeah, I can't do that for 2 hours. Um, but pediatrics was an area that I really enjoyed. Um, so ended up decided I had to have a job before I graduated. Was my goal for myself. And in 1993, there was a serious nursing glut. There's
Huh.
lots of nurses, not so many job openings. I went to Minneapolis to try and do some job searching. The HR person at Hennepin County Medical Center um, said, "You can come in. I'll be glad to talk with you." And she explained, "I'm a public facility. I have to take applications in the order I receive them. Um, I have 20 positions for new grads. I have 200 applicants.
Oh, wow.
It's like it's not anything you're doing. It's just it's the nature of the job market. So mom ended up sending me a article from the Nebraska Nursing Newsletter that Indian Health Services was looking for nurses for the Bemidji region, which covered South Dakota, North Dakota, part of Minnesota. It's like, okay, I've got to have a job. I've got to have a job. I'm going to apply. Ended up talking with the DON one day or after school, hung up and realized I think that was my job interview.
Mm,
Um, got the position, and so moved out to rural South Dakota sight unseen.
mm,
Had no idea what I was really getting into. So going from living and working in Des Moines, Iowa, 800-bed teaching hospital to 28-bed rural hospital.
mm,
I'm living in an apartment on the hospital compound because on the reservation, there is no rental housing.
mhm,
The majority of the staff were Native American. Most of them were from the Rosebud Sioux tribe, the local tribe, but there were some folks from other tribal areas, and a few non-Indian staff from a couple of towns hour away. So that was a big shock. I'd always lived in the city, never lived in the country. Um, but again, it was an amazing educational experience. I got to do a little bit of everything.
mm,
Um, I didn't start out being open there about my sexuality because I really wasn't sure how it was going to be taken. But after a couple of years and getting to know people and talk with people, it slowly came out. And really nobody cared. Um, so after 5 years or so, I decided that it was time for a change. So I was ready to get back to a city. I had been back to Minneapolis for a Bette Midler concert and stayed with some college friends, one of whom grew up UU. So we went to First Universalist in Minneapolis, and that was my first exposure to Unitarian Universalism. So for those of you who aren't aware, sometime in the 90s, they moved into what had formerly been a Jewish synagogue. So at the time, the pews had Star of David on the end of the pews, and there were still these big brass plates on the front wall that had Hebrew letters stamped out of them. But there was a big chalice and flame at the front. Um, and at the social hour afterwards, there were flyers for gay UUs, atheist UUs, Jewish UUs, all sorts of things. It was like, this is really interesting. I get home to South Dakota and find out the closest churches are 3.5 to 4 hours away.
mm.
Hey, maybe not going to be able to do this while I'm still in South Dakota, but when I move, I'm going to find a UU church. So, 98, 5 years being on the reservation, I was ready for a change and happened to come to a conference down here in Kansas City that Children's Mercy was co-sponsoring. Um, and I was like, okay, applied for a job while I was here and got a job offer. So made plans to move down. My mom at that point had been singing with the River City Mixed Chorus for a number of years as part of her coming out process and dealing with it. And River City had just done a joint concert with Heartland Men's Chorus. So mom's like, oh, you're moving to Kansas City. Well, guess what? There's a gay men's chorus there. You need to join.
Uh,
You like singing. It'll be a good way for you to meet people. So I got down here, and lo and behold, Heartland Men's Chorus was rehearsing at All Souls UU.
mm,
So I'm like, oh, two birds with one stone.
mm,
Join a men's chorus, find a church.
mm,
Um, so I started attending and ended up getting fairly involved pretty quickly. First with interweave, then with the choir because there was an interweave service, and somehow I got roped into singing with the choir and got hooked and kept singing with them. Um, Started teaching Sunday school and did that for 12 years. Basically took a group of kids from first and second grade all the way through high school. That was another time that was interesting for exploring spirituality because I ended up becoming the lead teacher, and basically Judith gave me free reign to come up with lesson plans. So we would have the general topic for the year, and I would just explore things. And so, you know, going down the rabbit hole, looking at world religions and coming up with things, and sure, come up with stuff that we're doing with the kids, and then I'd keep going,
Mm.
exploring things. So, got to do a lot of dabbling in different things and learning about different aspects. Um, doing coming of age with that group of kids. Plus, I started teaching our whole lives, the sexuality program. Did that for probably almost 20 years,
Mm.
up until COVID.
Mm.
I haven't taught since COVID hit, but this was also the time that I met Kelly. We met through the men's chorus, and so in at the time of my last Odyssey, was really striking was that I noticed that I was referring to him as my partner,
Mm.
and that we were having interesting spiritual discussions because I hadn't moved in with him yet. So we were barely a year into our relationship at that point.
Mm.
But we did have some really, really deep spiritual discussions, and he really pushed me,
Mm.
because at that point a lot of my spiritual identity was I don't believe that, I don't believe
Mm.
that, I don't believe that, I don't believe that. It's like, well, what do you believe?
Mhm. Mhm.
Like, I don't know.
Mm.
um so um one of the things that that's changed since the last Odyssey was, in 2003 I took building your own theology. So here was a chance to actually sit and think about what do I believe?
Mhm.
Learning about different kind of theological approaches, and realizing that okay, I am definitely not Christian. I don't believe in you know the classic God, but over time I've come to realize that um, in I guess in theological terms, I would describe myself as a deist. I think there's there's a higher, some sort of higher power. There's something bigger than me. I can't describe it or put it in a box, but there's something bigger. And working in healthcare, especially working with infants, is one of the things that really kind of crystallizes that for me. Looking just the miracle of life, looking at a baby that I can hold in my hand growing up into somebody my size.
Mhm.
And there are so many things that could happen or could go wrong in the development and in growth. And the fact that so many people don't have problems, so many babies are born perfectly healthy, is a miracle. Um, but I don't think that this higher power or this God, as a shorthand, um, I don't think that they're sitting there, interested in our individual little lives and like, oh, please God, let me pass this test. Oh, okay. Yeah. No, no, completely indifferent on the individual level.
Mm.
Um, I also would describe myself as somewhat of a mystic. That, at least according to the definition in
Mhm.
the Building Your Own Theology book, that believing that there's more than let's see how to say that more to life than eyes can see, ears can hear, nostrils can inhale, hands can touch, or words can express. There's something more. I don't need to define it because I can't.
Mm,
I can't fully define it. But that's not important. The fact is that there's something bigger than me, and that it's part of our whole life. It's part of connection with everybody. Um, the One of the other things that I have learned over time is that one of, I think, my most cherished spiritual practices is music, in particular singing. Being part of a group, um, I can lose myself in the music. And there's that whole sense of interconnectedness. The fact that, singing, I mean, scientific studies have shown singing in a group, you start to, be breathing together. You kind of, there's this, this bond. And, if you're, especially if you're singing unaccompanied, there's really, these ties that you're working as a group. One person being off pitch can pull the whole group in a different direction. So there's really that sense of interconnectedness. And I've said at the men's chorus, in some of our kind of icebreaker things, you know, this group is my spirituality.
mm,
This Heartland Men's Chorus, in a way, performing on stage, performing as part of a group, is my church. Um, so um, I have a whole bunch of other credo statements that are in my bag because I can't remember them all. But amazingly, going back and looking through my notes from Building Your Own Theology, almost everything that I wrote down then, I'm like, yeah, that still resonates.
mm.
Um, but I guess kind of in closing before questions, just brief um, some changes that have happened since my Odyssey in 2000. In 2003, Kelly and I got married here at All Souls. Um, in 2008, um, we got legally married in San Diego. In 2011, Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed, meaning that gays, lesbians, bisexuals, transgender people could openly serve in the military. In 2013 was United States versus Windsor. So the Defense of Marriage Act was struck down, and there was federal recognition of same-sex marriage. That same year, Missouri recognized gay marriage from other locations. They wouldn't perform it themselves, but if you got married legally someplace else, they'd recognize it. And then in 2015, Obergefell versus Hodges said that same-sex marriage was legal throughout the country. And then the most obvious change, this March, Kelly died unexpectedly. So almost 25 years with him.
Mm,
And, looking back, um, I mean, this was the first major long-term relationship I had. So, I mean, it's, a lot has happened.
mm,
A lot has happened, but I wouldn't give up any of the time.
mm.
I know that's kind of a downer to take the break on, but it's a good, I guess, a good place to take a pause.
Thank you. Let's do that. Let's take our pause. Okay, we will okay, I think now I'm talking. We will take up a collection while we think about our questions. I'm going to uh, be passing the microphone so that both the question and the answer can be recorded. So, Jefferson?
Um, Before the last 30 seconds of your presentation, I was going to ask you about handling loss in terms of working with children, because I know that at some point you must have had a loss, and how did you integrate that in to the rest of your life, including your spirituality? But I now want to enlarge that to the loss of your partner. Do you understand what I'm trying to ask?
Yeah, yeah. You know, it's one of those. I don't know that well, I can say I don't believe in kind of the traditional view of heaven. That there's a place where our soul goes afterwards. I do believe that there's something more than the physical body. There's something that's part of us. And I part of my belief and connection with that greater power is that something more comes from that other place, that greater power, and that when the physical body dies, that something more becomes part of that greater source again. Um, our individual experiences, I kind of think of it as having a glass of water, and experiences in your life are like adding drops of food coloring. And you put the glass of water back into a big pitcher. Yeah, those individual experiences can spread out and everything, but it's still there. You might not see it, the individual colors, but it's still there. And so I don't know, there might be some individual awareness or something after death. I don't know. Um, but you know that that's what that's what works for me. That I may not be reconnected with Kelly or with other people that have died on a face-to-face basis, but somehow there's going to be a reconnection with them after I die. Does that kind of answer?
Hey, Scott, I got a question for you, but first a small request. I think you said your voice getting lost in community, if I heard it right. I think you have a very distinctive voice, literally and figuratively. Dory gave us her front row center tickets for her and Joe. And I leaned over to my wife and I said, "Can you hear Scott's voice?" So even in that choir,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
so the small request is, can you say all souls, and all souls is full of wonderful people in Russian?
Mm, I would need a dictionary.
In that case, how about in a South Dakota accent?
Um, I'm not sure that I really remember
Okay.
any kind of specific South Dakota accent.
Here's the real question. Your voice in community, because you've been a leader for decades here. How do you see that thing that you just said about getting lost in community? Because you're not lost in community here. You're a valuable voice. How do you see that as your spirituality, the leadership you've shared, can you speak to that?
Um, yeah, I think there's a difference between getting lost in community and it's more seeing myself as a part of the larger whole. Um, in singing, um, I can guess, that feeling of losing myself is just forgetting so much about, exactly what I'm doing individually and how is my voice taking part in the big picture. In a community, in an organization, um, it's more not what's in it for me, but what am I doing as that can be part of the group, part of the organization? How am I serving the organization? Um, That's
Got early in your comments, you said that when you were in high school, you began directing a youth choir, which sparked for me the question, when did you first begin your love and involvement with music? Because that's been a major
yeah.
part of your gift to all of us and your involvement with life and philosophy from what you've just said.
Um, probably fourth or fifth grade. It was definitely elementary school. It was the good old, okay, we're gonna have a school band. And I picked tuba because that's what my dad played. And it turned out that, hey, I'm also a big guy, and tuba is a big instrument. So it fit. Um, and also turned out to be really helpful when it came time to when I started singing, because tuba is written in the bass clef. As a bass, I sing in the bass clef. And actually, one of the things in when we moved to back to Omaha to finish up high school, one of the ways I got involved with singing was I was in marching band, so started rehearsals before school started. And when school did start, then one of the first things coming up was going to be the fall musical. And all my friends in band were trying out for the musical because they were all in choir. I was like, oh, well, I guess I can try out for that too. And we were doing Music Man. Um, and so I snuck into the choir room and found the music for auditions. The only song I knew was 76 Trombones. So I'm like, okay, well, yeah, I can sing this. Start at home plunking it on the piano. Oh, that's too high. Oh, I'll just drop it an octave. So go to auditions, and I'm like, oh, hi, I'm Scott. I'm going to sing 76 Trombones. The company starts playing, like 76 trombones led the big parade. And the choir instructor went, who are you again? And why aren't you in my choir? And came to school the next morning and got called into the guidance counselor's office. And he's like, so Mr. Reimer came in to see me this morning, first thing before the school opened up, and you're in choir now. He understands you have to take driver's ed, and that's going to conflict with choir. But as soon as driver's ed's done, you're in choir. Like, oh, okay. So that's what really got me launched into vocal music, and got me going with singing, which yeah has become such a huge part of my life.
Here at trombones.
Scott, when you were serving with the Indian Health Service, did you have an opportunity to participate in any of the spiritual practices, the powwows and things like that? And how did you incorporate that?
um, looking back, that's one of the things, I think one of the regrets of my time was that um, I was on a set schedule. So I worked, in a 2-week rotation. I would work Monday, Tuesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Wednesday, Thursday, and repeat. On my days off, I got out of town. I'd head to Sioux Falls, I'd head to Rapid City. On weekends, I would head back to Omaha. I really didn't spend a whole lot of time on the reservation when I wasn't working. I, was aware of, um, some of the, cultural and spiritual things going on. And that was one of the interesting dichotomies was that um, the Catholic Church had a very heavy presence on the reservation, but there was also a lot of traditional belief, and to the point of families would have there was one patient in particular that the family brought in a medicine bundle and had it under the hospital bed. The patient was a little iffy and we wanted to move him closer to the nurse's station. We had to send a security guard out to try and track down one of the medicine men on the reservation to come in and move the medicine bundle, because if any of us who weren't medicine people touched it, we'd destroy the medicine. Um, I also got to hear from the Native Americans who were on staff, some of the derision for white people that would come out to the reservation and want to be initiated into things. They're like, oh, honored elder, and oh, teach me your ways. It's like that's not my heritage. It's not my place. Now, if somebody invited me to take part in a sweat or to come to watch the Sundance or to come take part in a powwow, I would have done that, I think, but I wasn't active in seeking out those experiences.
Have you thought of starting a boys' choir here?
Um, I haven't. Um, I've learned I enjoy being part of the group much more than I like being up in front. And that goes for a lot of different things. I enjoy being in the background doing things rather than being the visible face of it.
Any other questions? Ah,
So I'm curious in the mysticism that you've kind of bought into, and I don't mean that negative way, but uh, where's the role of hope, and what does that offer in terms of hope? And what I'm thinking of, a lot of people have heaven as kind of their hope, right? And particularly in this time period where I see a lot of people without hope, I'm curious where you find that.
Um, I think in some ways, my vision of hope would be influenced by humanism. That it's not the promise of a great hereafter. It's not the glories and gifts of heaven. The hope is what's going to happen here. What can we do here to make things better? And I'm going to totally butcher it, and I think it's Everett Hale. I don't remember, but one of my favorite readings from the back of the hymnal is something to the effect of, um, "I can't do everything, but because I can't do everything doesn't mean that I won't do the one thing I can do." And so remembering, that just because I can't create world peace. I can't end the Ukrainian war. I can't end hunger in America. But that doesn't mean that I have to be stuck in inaction. Find what I can do, what difference I can make, and even if it's one person, um, that makes a difference. And so that's where I think hope can come in. That you know any little difference can cascade and cause so much change that we're not even aware of.
I'm gonna stop at that note. I'm sorry. Run out of time. And so beautifully said, Scott. I cannot thank you enough. You have really gifted us today with your story and with who you are, um, not just in this church, but in the community. So thank you.
Thank you.